Now let's hear from Rich Valdes. He has hosted talk shows on WABC in New York and radio stations on Long Island, Philadelphia, a show on iHeartRadio, and the new nationally syndicated late night radio show, Rich Valdes, America at Night, the slot once hosted by Jim Bohannon and the great Larry King on Westwood One Network on Cumulus Media. And he steps in for the great one, Mark Levin. That's on my bucket list. And he is Mr. Call Screener. So thanks for joining me, Rich. Look, we got lots of stuff bugging me lately, but enough about me. Tell me what's been bugging you.
You know, Dennis Neal, what's bugging me right now is Microsoft and the way they update these things right when you're about to make a Zoom call to Dennis Neal to find out what's bugging me. And so that's the first thing that's bugging me. The second thing that's bugging me, I would say, is the lack of transparency. Right now, you've got the commander of NORAD coming out, and he says, well, we're not going to rule out extraterrestrials or anything like that. And then Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, she comes out and she says, well, actually, there's no aliens involved, none of that. So just put that to rest. And, you know, you've got General Austin or Secretary Austin, former General Austin, as well as former Admiral Kirby and everybody else saying, we don't know. We don't know what these things are. We know one was a Chinese spy balloon. The rest are unidentified, unauthorized, objects in the sky that were near aerial facilities of the United States military where they did practice and whatnot. So they had to be taken out. And again, I don't know if they're just playing coy because now Biden says, well, you mean we could shoot things out of the sky? Jill, get my shotgun. I don't know if that's the take that he's doing. So he can say we're shooting everything out of the sky. Or is it that, we really are under some sort of siege and we're just finding out about it? And while I'm trying to find that out, they're trying to backpedal and say, well, Trump was under siege. There was plenty of these during the Trump administration. And I just can't see Trump saying, let it be. It's huge, but let it be. He's not going to do that. Right. So I think ultimately what you have to have here is a little bit of honesty and just tell the people what's going on. Say, look, we've got ET is up there. He's phoning home and he's sending his ships or whatever. It's China, it's Russia, it's Iran. I mean, it's the United States. We're spying on you. It seems like there's too much going into saying they don't know.
First, we had the whole week of delay under Biden in which they didn't shoot it down. I think Biden would have wanted to shoot it down earlier, and they told him no. And you got to wonder, I thought he was the commander in chief. Then they say, oh, well, this happened 3 times during the Trump administration. Pompeo comes out and said, no, it didn't. Trump says, right. No, it didn't, which means that the military either kept it from Trump because they're afraid what he would do, or they didn't know and they were lying now. That's since changed. I saw a great story in the Wall Street Journal by James Arity. He was based in Beijing for 19 years. That guy writes about the China balloon program, and they really have been working on this for more than a decade, and they're way ahead of us. I don't know that we're doing this. Do you ever worry, though, that now that they're shooting them down left and right, we've got, 4 incidents, that in some way it's a distraction from something else?
Yeah, exactly. And that was my point. I feel like, now they're saying, oh, you know what, if this is getting so much attention and it's going to take the eye off inflation, it's going to take the eye off our economy on the way we're spending on. I mean, there's nothing for Biden really to tout. We saw his State of the Union a week and a half ago, and that was pretty abysmal. I think the biggest applause line he got was where he said, we're going to take the resort fees out of vacations and from hotels. And, everybody's
credit cards.
Right. And okay, great. But let's not forget we're under attack. Let's not forget, they've got this chemical spill from this train in Ohio. And again, that's the official narrative. Who knows what really happened there? So, I mean, there's so many things that are on the radar to me that are affecting people. There's joke after joke when I scroll on social media about, people opening up their trench coats and, I got eggs. I got a dozen eggs, for cheap. I mean, people can't afford to eat. And here we are playing with flying saucers and shooting them out of the sky. I don't know that that's where we need to be. And we have to defend America. I just don't know if we should be all in that way. It could potentially be a huge distraction.
It seemed like there was a time though when the media definitely would have been there on either story, the shoot downs or the terrible chemical spill and derailment and the decision to do a controlled burn of that thing, which then of course is putting a huge cloud of toxicity into the sky there. But you don't get the feeling the media are there kind of to mediate and to kind of provide some type of central version of events. It seems like they kind of stand down most of the time.
There's a network called News Nation, And one of their shows, Rush Hour, I was watching a clip of it yesterday. One of their reporters was doing a stand-up in a gymnasium where they were giving a report. And the guy, I guess he wasn't in the authorized place where the rest of the media was. And they told him, you got to move, you got to move, you got to move. He said, I have a right to be here. They locked this guy up. They tackled him to the ground, handcuffed him. It's all on video. And I just thought, if you're trying to help someone believe that there isn't a massive cover up and you're not blocking the media from covering a story, don't do that. Because that's only going to feed that narrative. And lamentably, it was horrible to see. And
I saw
I'm sure
that
there's more
footage,
story.
Rich Valdes. I saw that footage, and it's kind of authority is now out of control since COVID-19. And reporters do little live break-ins during an event all the time. It happens. And when something like this happens with a more conservative focused network, you end up worrying or wondering, is it about censorship or is it really just about authority and control? Look at what happened between Newsmax and DirecTV, owned by AT&T. They had already taken OAN, Conservative Network, off of the bird there in last April after Democrats sent a letter saying, hey, how can you keep these terrible misinformation conservative networks? And now they've booted Newsmax off for daring to ask for a dime a month per subscriber. And is it because of a business decision? No, it's because it's a conservative voice.
Yeah, 100%. And I think they're paying the price. I looked at an article just a day or two ago. It says that their stock is down $10 billion since the date that they've decided to play games with Newsmax. And I agree. Look, Newsmax had the ratings. They were bigger than a lot of others. They're the fourth largest cable news channel. And it's clear they just wanted to squash a voice that they didn't agree with. And it's lamentable. And I think I don't know if there's a way out of this, honestly, but when you have people that are activists and choose to be an activist before being a professional and choose their ideological vision or passion over what they were there to do as a fiduciary of the company, saying, I'm here for a bottom line, for a profit, and everybody on the board goes along with it, you don't win that fight. You could use government intervention, but if you've got a bunch of lefties that run AT&T and they hate everybody on the right or the middle or center right, I think they're going to win every single time.
It's really gotten much worse. All of my career, when I was a journalist, 16 years at the Journal, and then at Forbes after that, always I was a little more conservative than everyone else around me. Even on the Journal staff, they were quite liberal. But now they let that show up in their news writing, in their coverage, in what they decide not to cover. We're looking at the Twitter Files hearing where Jim Jordan and the Republicans are doing a great job of holding these people accountable. There's been some great moments. And yet we keep seeing Democrats try to undermine it. We keep seeing media barely cover it. They're burying the story. I don't understand when they decided to abandon their role as a check on all of government and instead to only be a check on Donald Trump and the Republicans.
I think it probably started in small part during the Clinton years and grew from there. He wasn't really that heavy-handed, but I think from there were remnants of that, and then ushered in Obama. And I think Obama was really the one that solidified and said, wow, we have all this power and we're not using it. Tell Lois Lerner not to approve any more 501c3s for the Tea Party.
Right.
Let's make sure that they're not out there getting tax breaks. Let's make sure that they're not able to have a voice and raise money and do what they've got to do. And I think, when you are a person that wakes up in the morning and says, hey, look, I'm just going to take a shower. I'm going to live my life in a clean, honest fashion. Like Reagan said, get off my back and out of my pocket. And that's all I want to do is feed my family. That doesn't work anymore. You can't just live your life. They're coming after you. So now you're in for a fight every single day. They're after your kids in the public classroom. They're after your paycheck with a new tax, inflation, you name it. Right. So it's no longer you get up and don't bother me and I won't bother you. No, they're bothering you. They're coming after you. So either you're going to fight or you're not going to fight. And I think the conservative is typically conditioned to be like, no. I don't want any part of this. Look, I'm just here to do my thing with my family. And that doesn't work anymore. Everybody is in the fight or you're not, right? You're going to get beat up or you're not.
They are coming after us. I mean, look at the whole degrowther movement. Of course, Mark Levin is railed against that. And I kept thinking that's just sounding a little weird, but then it ends up coming true. There's a great op-ed the other day in the Wall Street Journal by, I believe her name is Alicia Finley, about how, look, the real goal is not to switch us from gasoline-powered cars to EV-powered cars. The real goal is to switch us to no cars, that electric cars are just the midpoint. You get it to there, you require everyone to get it. People can't afford it, so they end up having to live in these 15-minute zones in the cities where they can have public transportation. You end up having no choice because you cannot afford to have a choice.
I'm not trying to be provocative, but if you look at the macro perspective of communism, of creating silos of people, they're literally creating silos of people. You know, I live in Jersey now, about 4 miles outside of Times Square in New York City, and there's a mall over here, and it's a big mall, and it's surrounded by some industrial stuff, not very residential immediately around it. Now they're building a residential park around this place. So they can put green space in there. I don't know, 1,500 or 2,000 apartments surrounding a shopping mall so that nobody has to leave. Everybody could work there, play there, eat there, stay there. And it's just a fascinating concept. It's like the concept of New York City, right? Maybe they'll put a monorail in there so they can get around. And it's like the subway of New York City, and you work in the city, you play in the city, you hang out in the city, you don't go anywhere. And
now here's the thing though, Rich,
where they are.
I love that if private development and the profit motive, and it turns out this is what people want, and the market comes up and serves it. And if government wants to make it easier to regulate less harshly so that you can have new housing, there is a housing shortage. There is a glut of shopping malls everywhere because they've been put out of business by Amazon and online. You could indeed raise money to convert these things into kind of these communities. That's great. Just don't penalize me for having a car. Don't try to tax me out of it. Don't try to, force me to give up gas. It's just, they start with a good intent or with something that might have some appeal, but then they have to turn it into an oppressive type of requirement and prerequisite, which is kind of what they did with the COVID-19 vaccine. It went from a patriotic, kind and considerate act to get one to instead you do this or we'll deprive you of your livelihood.
Or you're fired.
Is it in Brazil or another country down there that said, hey, you can't get any government dole unless you have the vaccine? I
saw that in France. I saw somebody trying to buy a loaf of bread. Like, I don't know how genuine the video was, but they said you can't come in the supermarket if you don't have your vax card, showing that you were vaxxed. And I was like, man, that's pretty tough.
This is another space to watch. I've been talking to a couple of guys about this lately. This idea of a digital currency, a Bitcoin that's backed by government, which sounds great. It's just that as soon as it replaces cash, you no longer have any privacy. They can now regulate what you want to purchase. It can be like JP Morgan Chase refusing to let you use their Visa card to buy a gun, even though the gun is a legal purchase. It's tech and government get together. That's when you have the biggest problem of all.
Last night I spoke with a fellow from the Energy and Environment Legal Group or Legal Coalition, and they made a great case, Steve Malloy, about how both digital currency, the electric car, all of this stuff can be turned on, turned off, and controlled by some regulatory agency of the government. So should there ever be, we have a brownout, you can't drive. That's not just you can't drive, they'll prevent you from driving because they can control the car.
It's a little eerie, Rich Valdes, that Elon Musk, whom I admire greatly, but indeed with Tesla, they do have the ability to start your parked car up and drive it some other place, leaving you behind. And they could indeed repossess, reclaim, and the government could end up stepping in and doing that once you have that possible with the electric grid. Well, let's try to think about this, though. Rich Valdes, the host of that nationally syndicated late night radio show, Rich Valdes, America at Night. Let's look for a solution. What can your listeners do? What can my listeners here on What's Bugging Me do to push back against all of this?
I think about this a lot, and I use myself as an example of it. I think, what have I done? And I always think, you've got to have a bunch of kids. You got to have a whole mess of kids, and you've got to teach them to get into the fight. And I don't know that I've been that successful. I only have 2 kids, and one of them is very liberty-minded. The other one is also very liberty-minded. They both are. But I think neither of them really wants to do what I do for a living and, run their mouth or really be involved at that level. And honestly, I understand people don't want to do that. I've encouraged them to do it. I hope, things go different for them and they do get involved, because that's really the only way to do it. We've got to fight and fight a lot. and you've got to get people on the inside. I mean, so there's the proselytizing of the message of liberty. I think that has to continue. People need to be Hannitized and Levinatized and all of that stuff, because people need to hear this stuff and understand that, you know, I don't think people in talk radio are a bunch of crazies. I think they just put a little bit more thought into some things than others have, and have had the time and the opportunity, the luxury to do that, and have these longer segments than television provides and longer time slots. You know, a 3-hour show is a typical radio show than an hour cable show. And when you know that, but that's just part of the fight. I think you need people that are on the school board. You need people that are working in government as attorneys. And a lot of people, you know, you get a lot of conservatives today. They're like, I don't want to work in the government. Like, I worked in the government and I left because I didn't want to work in the government. And, you know, so, I mean, I understand when somebody says, look, I don't want to do that. Who wants to voluntarily go to the swamp? Donald Trump did. And I always give him credit for that. And I say, look, he left this beautiful skyscraper with his name on it, took his supermodel wife and his family. They moved to the swamp. No doubt, nice house. Probably not nicer than where he was living, but again, nice house, but a horrible job. You know, he did a good job, but it was a horrible gig for him. He lost a bunch of money. They went after his kids. They went after his family. They went after him incessantly. When you look at that, you say, man, it's not a really good gig. I don't know if I want to do that. So it's a really tough gig. And I think it's just about passion and energy. Ultimately, I've always said, to simplify things, everything's like getting punched in the face. You know, if you get punched in the face, you can either punch somebody back, or you can go, hey, why are you punching me? If you're going to ask them why, they're going to punch you again while you're asking, you know, and ultimately the only way to get somebody to stop punching you in the face is to make sure you take action that'll make them stop punching you in the face. And right now, I think we're getting punched in the face by the left.
I agree with you. And it's time to stand up and be heard. It's time to think with a contrarian approach. All that we hear from the media, from our ruling leaders, you should question and ask what's wrong with this picture. It's been a pleasure having you here, Rich Valdes. Rich Valdes, America at Night on Westwood One Radio and Cumulus. Thanks so much for joining us, and I hope to see you again, all right?
You bet, Dennis Neal. And anytime you want me on What's Bugging Me, there's always something bugging me, so I'm happy to join you.
I'm happy to have you, man. Have a great day, sir.
Yes, sir.